Get ready!
Am I the only one who thinks style over substance is used a bit too often as a negative? Whenever I hear that in review of pretty much anything, it seems like it's always a mark against whatever they're talking about, as if going for style makes something inherently lesser. Personally, as a big fan of games like Jet Set Radio and Katamari Damacy, among a few others, I think stylish games and other media have their own place. They're not the most complex or deep games, but they have personality and can be lots of fun. We need style, or everything would look like Call of Duty. But what if a game focused so much on being a visual spectacle, it seemingly just gave up on, actually being a great game? Well, there are probably quite a few games that can answer that question, but I'm gonna talk about Gungrave, because I found it for like $10, and I want to talk about it. It's pretty much the only reason. Gungrave is a PS2 exclusive title whose main unique selling point was its character designs being done by the manga artist Yasuhiro Naito, creator of Trigun and Blood Blockade Battlefront. The only information I could find on how this even happened is that Naito was approached by the developer Red Entertainment while attending a convention in America, which might have influenced part of the visual design. So he applied his usual sense of style to the original concept, an attempt to combine edgy American comics, spaghetti westerns, and John Woo films to create something that would stand out from the crowd. Doesn't that sound awesome? Just look at this cover featuring the main character. Yeah, he looks kind of try-hardy, but I think it works. Even the intro has this awesome music set to crazy action, ending with a shot of the protagonist surrounded by spent shell casings. It's just... That's great. I might as well check the options first. That's just something I do for most games. Look like this is where I set the difficulty. It's a bit... Wow. Well, let's start the game. It actually opens with a pretty intriguing cutscene showing this young girl struggling to drag a coffin behind her. She takes it to a hideout where we get introduced to our main character, Beyond the Grave. That is a name. He opens the coffin and reveals his two big hand cannons, getting ready like he's going to his day job or something. So decked out with his cowboy hat and very decorated coffin, he walks to some kind of nightclub and starts beating the crap out of everyone. Wow. That's how the game starts, just tossing you in the first level without much context so you can start shooting very low poly enemies. There's a bit more story later on, like how Grave's real name was Brandon before he died, which is not nearly as cool as Beyond the Grave, and also none of the story really matters. You're just kinda here to kill everything inside and hopefully look cool while doing it. Actually, the dev team said one of their main goals in designing the game was to make something drunk salarymen would play when they get back home, something that was just visually exciting without needing to really focus on anything. Not kidding, they actually said that. Now, I cannot confirm if they did a good job at that specifically, but if you want to test that for me, feel free to do so, and leave your findings in the comments below. From the premise and aesthetic, you might think this would be an example of what people incorrectly refer to as character action games, but with those with common sense and good taste called spectacle fighters. Games like Bayonetta, Devil May Cry, Vanquish, sort of, where the whole point is being over the top while fighting lots of enemies. Yeah, it's not like that at all. Gungrave is actually a slowly paced, third-person shooter with really simplistic gunfights. The controls are kind of really weird. Instead of shooting with the triggers, you just hold down square and move the left analog stick. Grave will just shoot everything you see while making poses, but you can't move while he's doing this. This is the only way to really control the camera, since the default just kinda lazily follows you around, almost like a kind of slower version of the over-the-shoulder cam for most third-person games we're used to nowadays. But unlike most shooters, you don't really need to try in Gungrave. Just randomly move the stick while holding square, and you can take out entire rooms of enemies in no time at all. It's like playing with some kind of cheat code, or being John Wick, but it's just how the game works. You can move around if you want, but you're not very fast, and there's not really much point to it. One thing that does kind of help is diving around by tapping X, which also looks kind of hilarious. Grave will leap in 4 directions, which somehow makes his guns fully automatic, kind of reminds me of Wet, where the main character shoots with both guns while doing acrobatics. Anyone remember that game? Just me? Okay. The more you shoot, the more you'll build up your beat count, which is sort of like how fighting games keep track of your combos. If you get the beat count high enough, you'll get some... I'm not even sure what to call it, demolition energy? It's called the demolition gauge, and it'll fill up the more you kill and destroy. Once you've got enough, you can unleash a demolition shot, which is just one of 4 super attacks. Okay, well, more like 2 different ones and an upgraded version for each. They're called Death Blow, which is a big rocket, Bullet Dance, a spitting spray of machine gun fire, along with their leveled up versions of Hellhound Roar and Raging Inferno. These names... wow. You can also use a shot to restore life, which is super useful later on. It's not really difficult to build up the gauge since the whole game is built around holding square and just letting Grave do his thing. That doesn't mean it's boring, it's actually kind of fun. Plowing through waves of enemies with no hope of taking you down can be pretty exciting, especially when you go in with dives and stuff to add a bit more energy to the chaos. In fact, it's beneficial to do that as much as possible. Aside from your beat count, you also get a rating at the end of each level based on how cool you looked or something. Stuff like dive shooting, point blank kills, and tapping the pose button. Yes, the select button is specifically used to make Grave strike a pose. It's all in the name of fun. What does this do for you in the grand scheme of things? You get points. That's it. And honestly, it does at least look cool. Let's just take another look at Beyond the Grave, our very overly decorated protagonist. Yeah, the proportions are a bit off, but I think he's unique, if nothing else. I really like Naito's style. It's very sharp and clean while conveying motion and energy. Look at Vash the Stampede, his giant revolver and his super flowy red jacket. It might not be to everyone's taste, but it's certainly distinct. Grave is pretty much Vash if he got super into metal, stopped talking, and decided to stop valuing the lives of others. I like it. I don't know, maybe I just have weird taste, but I find his design weirdly appealing in a stupid way. Going along with this is the soundtrack, which is just awesome and also kind of terrible. It's weird. While there are a few okay rock tracks, most of it's actually jazz, which I think fits the vibe the game's going for much better. I mean, it would be kind of really lame if it was hard metal or something like that. Could you imagine if something like the soundtrack to Shadow the Hedgehog was playing over this? It would be... it'd be something, that's for sure. Lots of horns and drums, some more energetic than others, and even featuring some guitars every now and then. There's even 1 or 2... I'm not even sure what to call them really, cowboy songs, the kind of thing you'd hear in an avant-garde action western movie. There's even one that sounds like traditional Japanese instruments, which, I mean, I liked. It's a very eclectic soundtrack. I'd say it's right up there with Katamari Damacy in terms of variety. Even if I don't really like a handful of them, just go look up the song Ear Fudge and you'll get a good idea for what the songs are like. I just wish I could hear them in the game, since they're usually drowned out by... yeah, that. Kind of a shame the audio mixing is so skewed toward the sound effects, especially since basically every enemy has a gun that sounds the exact same. I think the levels would be a lot more enjoyable if I had some music to accompany my rampages. Wait, I want to try something.
Body's bullshit blazing, still my heart is blazing. If the word kill me, I don't need a new word under you. Soon you will know, we already know the smell of the game.
Yeah, that's way better. It'd be really cool if Naito worked on an Arc Sys game. Another thing that would have made this better if the game ran well, you would think they would make sure the game ran smoothly at least, since the whole point is to mow down loads of enemies, but even making all the enemies look like they were imported from the PS1 doesn't stop it from chugging cottage cheese cocktails when there's a lot going on, especially when you use a demolition shot. It's like it runs in slow motion. At first, I thought it did this just to give it like more impact or something, but No, I think it's just tanking the performance. Shame, really. I feel like this was all one big tangent. What was I talking about? Oh, right, the story. So the first two levels are a nightclub and some kind of factory, which I think are supposed to be connected to the main bad guys somehow. By the way, I just realized I forgot to comment on how slow Grave walks. He's pretty slow. Unless you hold down the run button and spam dive, he just kind of trudges along like a sulky teenager being forced to shop for back-to-school clothes. Starting at stage 3, which for some reason is Chinatown, we get just a bit more story, just a tad, just an itty-bitty bit. Grave talks to what looks like an informant for a few moments before outright killing him and moving on to killing more people. Lots of them. Again, this is actually my favorite level because the environments are a bit more colorful and there's enough of a gap between gunfights to hear the music, which is pretty good. It also features enemies that use rocket launchers, giving you another reason to use the dive, giving it a bit more energy. This is, in my opinion, the best part of the game. Unfortunately, this level also includes a really cramped room that isn't very fun and then loses all the color afterwards. Then a big digger claw thing bursts onto the scene and you have to run. At first I thought I was supposed to shoot it, but no, you just run away. After a quick shootout in this restaurant, which might be on a blimp, I wasn't really paying attention, you meet the 5 big targets of the story. They are the new leaders of the Millennium organization, which Grave was once a member of. They staged a coup against the former leader, Big Daddy. Okay. Led by this guy named Harry, so Big Daddy's daughter Mika revived Grave to take out the organization. So yeah, that's what's going on. Using the same research that made Grave, you know, a super-powered zombie assassin tank thing, they gave themselves crazy powers and serve as the bosses for the rest of the game. First is Bob Poundmax. Oh my gosh, these names are so stupid. He's not so bad, you just kind of fight him and a few of his goons before he, okay, right after the doctor guy helped you was killed, Mika's kidnapped, so now you gotta go after her. I don't really like this level, it's just one really long hallway with a really annoying train section, not very good. The boss here is named Ballad Bird Lee, a martial artist who really disappoints me by turning into a monster. Really wanted to fight him, hand-to-hand cannons, but whatever. Then Grave rides his stupidly cool motorcycle into a sewer level where I noticed the coffin sounds like a gun when it's grinding against a wall. That's weird. Right after that, it cuts to near silence as you walk through some torii gates, giving me the weirdest screenshot I've seen in a while. The third guy is Bear WALKEN, who probably has the most normal name so far, who I didn't really like at first. I thought it was really cheap with all the thrown helicopters that were really obnoxious to dodge, but I figured out what I needed to do after a few deaths. He's all about keeping a specific distance and dodging the shockwaves while keeping up constant fire. Overall, not bad, but a bit frustrating if you don't know what to do. It was also this fight where I found out you can do a special demolition shot when the skull thing's on fire, so that's cool. Then the building explodes, but you're fine. The next stage is just a boss fight, and it stinks. His name is BUNJI KUGASHIRA, and he's quite possibly one of the cheapest boss fights I've ever beaten. First thing he does, the very first thing he does whenever you fight him is a super attack that you can't just dodge and wipes out about a third of your health. The only way to avoid it, at least that I found, is to run away as soon as the fight starts, which you wouldn't know without needing to restart the fight a few times. Next, he shoots invisible bullets at you, which isn't too bad if you know how to repeatedly side dive, but Grave is too stoic and cool to show any signs of getting hurt, so you can just take a lot of damage by keeping your eyes on BUNJI instead of your health bar. Those would both be fine if he didn't heal himself. Yep, when you're about to win, he'll be a total coward and just run behind the pillars to shout at the air and to regenerate health. You can't stop him from doing that, he just runs as fast as you and has a faster melee, so he can just kick you away if you catch up. which is just loads of fun, especially when there's no way to stop him from healing. Can't destroy the pillars, can't shoot him from far away, you just need to kill him before he gets a chance. Which I eventually managed to do by spamming death blows. Yeah, that's cheap, but I was only able to do so because the game generously gives you a demolition shot when you die. I had 8 when I decided to just get it over with. The final stage... how can I put this? Violently face plants into a flaming bed of spikes. The final level is just not fun at all. You climb this weird series of platforms while fighting these, I don't even know what they are, that take way too many hits. And yes, you can fall off the platforms, which is a great thing to suddenly include when one of the major aspects of your rather shallow combat system is diving all over the place to make your guns shoot faster. After a while, I managed to reach Harry, who you don't even fight, instead you're warped to something that looks like it's from an entirely different game, to fight Big Daddy, who's been transformed into a real Big Daddy. This is also one of the cheapest boss fights I've ever played. This is a pretty typical setup, you know, some big thing slamming its fists on the ground, except that wasn't enough. So he also sweeps the small platform that you're on, throws repeated punches that you can't dodge, and has a second phase, which... okay, that second phase isn't so bad. You just shoot the eyeballs one at a time, dodging the ones fired while running down the hallway. Still kind of irritating, but not really as bad as BUNJI. After you kill Big Daddy, Harry's just kind of gives up because I guess he never thought to give himself better powers than Grave, and then just lets Grave shoot him. For a while I just waited for it to end, but they actually keep it in this scene until you press the button, which is pretty awesome. It's kind of like Snake Eater, but like 2 years before that game did it. That was pretty cool. I like that. It ends with Grave riding off with Mika to parts unknown, and then credits just 2 hours after it started. Yeah, 2 hours. Beat this game in a single sitting, which might be why my summary sounded so condensed or something. I don't even know. I just described what happened in the game. That's just what it's like. Actually, when I reached the end, one other game came to mind. The Order 1886. That game was a super short, mediocre shooter whose only real point of quality was the graphics. It had promise, but decided to just make it look nice instead of trying something interesting, and ended up being a bland shooter with a flimsy story, not worth its asking price. I actually tried playing it a few years ago and I found it for $10. It's not terrible, but it's not really noteworthy either. Gungrave kind of reminds me of it, although at least Gungrave is interesting to look at. I also got Gungrave for $10, and I feel the same way as I did with The Order. I went through it, I liked some parts, hated others, and felt indifferent about most of it. I like the style and general spectacle, but I don't like how easy it is. I like the music, but I don't like the performance. I also don't like how cheap some bosses can be, and the general lack of personality from the cast, which is really weird. Because you look at this guy, you think maybe he'll do something neat. Maybe he'll be like Dante, but quiet. So, guess not very interesting at all. It's just so weird how the majority of things I like in this game have nothing to do with actually playing the game itself. It has some nice parts, but just kind of ends up feeling like nothing really happened except a constant stream of gunfire. Again, not bad, just kind of unfulfilling. On the bright side, there was an anime series from 2003, which has some pretty good reception, and a sequel in 2004 called Gungrave Overdose, which also got better reviews. Knowing that, it feels like the first game was simply a base, a test to see if the concept could be built upon. And, well, I guess it fulfills that purpose. One day, I'll be sure to check out Overdose, which must be better, because one of the playable characters is named Rockabilly REDCADILLAC. I got nowhere to go from there, that's just a cool name. Bye.